Following last month's retrospective on Supermassive Games, we thought this month we'd shine a light on one of the other pioneers of the horror gaming genre. If you're into horror games, then you've come to the right place, as we take a look back at the Penumbra series by Frictional Games and explore the path of this trailblazing series. Before Amnesia: The Dark Descent infected our minds with Lovecraftian horror, and Soma made us question our humanity, Frictional Games was known for their very first horror project, Penumbra. Penumbra mashes up survival and psychological horror game trappings with adventure game mechanics to create a unique experience. An experience that was successful enough to form the basis for their later projects. The series was originally announced as an episodic trilogy, following in the footsteps of the Half-Life 2 episodes, which were shaking up the video game industry at the time. Ultimately, Penumbra would receive 2 full games and 1 final expansion that wrapped up the story. As Frictional Games continues to evolve along with the horror video game genre, it is worth taking a look back at one of the series that informed our modern-day horror games. Join us as we celebrate each game in the Penumbra series. Penumbra Overture. Released in March 2007, Penumbra Overture is the first entry in the horror series, and it successfully set the stage for a terrifying story. Players take on the role of Philip, a physicist who is following the trail of breadcrumbs left behind by his late father. The clues lead Philip to a desolate part of northern Greenland. After reaching his destination by cargo ship, the frigid cold leads him to break into an abandoned mine to escape that intense cold. The feeling of safety is short-lived as the entrance collapses behind him, and the game begins. Whereas most horror games at the time had some kind of combat to defend yourself, Penumbra Overture instilled a sense of helplessness by opting for a more stealth-based approach when dealing with threats. It is possible to use tools as makeshift weapons, but the odds of survival against the horrors that inhabit the mine are very slim, and you have a better chance of surviving by running away than fighting. The Newton Game Dynamics physics engine allowed players to interact with objects in the environment realistically. It also aided in making the game's many puzzles more tactile and physical. From stressful beginning to cliffhanger ending, Penumbra Overture is a tense, terrifying experience that leaves the player wanting more and primes them for the horrors in the next installment. Penumbra Black Plague. Penumbra's story continues in Penumbra Black Plague. Released just under a year after the first game in February 2008, the second episode expands the universe's lore and setting while making some major changes to the game's mechanics. Penumbra Black Plague begins with Philip waking up in a research facility run by the archaic Elevated Caste, a shadowy sect of scholars who are seeking some kind of dangerous ancient knowledge. Philip quickly learns that the facility is inhabited by its former personnel, who are now mindless, zombie-like creatures. Even worse, Philip is also infected with this disease and is haunted by the malicious voice of Clarence, who torments him for the whole game. Another side effect of this infection is visual and auditory hallucinations that provide the bulk of the scares. This effect is very similar to the insanity effects that Frictional would later use for Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Unlike the first game, Black Plague ditches the makeshift combat and opts for stealth and avoidance, with the alternative being death at the hands of the infected. Gameplay is rounded out by exploration and a smattering of puzzles. Due to undisclosed issues with the publisher of the first 2 Penumbra games, what was originally planned as a trilogy was ended after the second game. However, Penumbra would officially wrap up its story in an unexpected third entry, Penumbra Requiem. A mere 6 months after Penumbra Black Plague, an expansion to the sequel was released as Penumbra Requiem. Frictional Games decided to dip into the series one more time for a shorter experience that tied up loose ends in the story and gave some closure for underutilized characters. The developers also used Requiem as a way to showcase advancements they had made to their proprietary HPL Engine 1 and its detailed physics effects. To do this, Penumbra Requiem was designed solely as a puzzle game, eschewing any kind of enemy encounters and stealth mechanics. Penumbra Requiem brought the series to a satisfying end while setting players up for Frictional's next projects. In fact, this third entry and Amnesia: The Dark Descent were in development simultaneously at one point. And while they might seem aged by today's standards, horror game fans owe quite a lot to the Penumbra series' innovation and creativity. Frictional Games' most recent title is the sand-blasted Amnesia Rebirth, but whatever they put out next, you can be sure that it will live in your nightmares, like all of their other games. So what is your favorite horror game by Frictional Games? Let us know in the comments, but always be nice to each other. And while you're here, why don't you check out our indie game spotlight on Dread Templar: Badassness Defined. I'm Mike Golchinski, and I'll see you in the next video.